Everyone has a story to tell. Welcome to DingoTalk, where we explore the experiences that make us who we are. Here's your host, Carlo Guadagnino.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is DingoTalk. My guest this week is the head football coach at Lake Forest College, Coach Jim Catanzaro. Now, before we get into Coach Cat's story, let's talk a little bit about Lake Forest. Lake Forest is located in Lake Forest, Illinois. They have 1,700 students, $69,000 before aid. After aid, that drops all the way down to $21,000. They have a 59% acceptance rate and a 73% graduation rate. Their top three majors are business, psychology, and the social sciences. And again, as I tell you every week, make sure if this is somewhere that you're interested in, first off, you can go to the website, www.lakeforest.edu. That'll give you all the quick facts. But make sure you're talking to your guidance counselor, you're talking to your parents, you're talking to your football coaches, the coaches that are recruiting you, the admissions counselors at Lake Forest. They're all going to be able to help you with the information that you need. Now, Coach Cat, as we talked in these previous interviews, this was all done before the season started. Coach Cat was getting ready to go to, and Lake Forest, we're getting ready to go to Arizona. So we talk about that. We talk about why Arizona has been such a big place for recruitment for him. We talk about him becoming the athletic director, working on his doctorate, and so much more. But it's not my job to tell Coach Cat's story. That's his job. So without further ado, this is Coach Cat.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week is the head football coach at Lake Forest College, Coach Jim Catanzaro. Coach, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you having me on, man. Been a long-time follower of your work. Excited to be here.
Appreciate that, Coach. Well, then you know what we're going to do. We're going to throw you in the time machine, and we're going to work our way to today. So talk to me about 96, 97. How do you find yourself at Greenville?
Yeah, so I was at a summer camp the year before my senior year. It was actually being run by Norm Sanju, who was the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks at the time. And it was a basketball camp. And I was like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to play football or basketball at that time. I thought I was too small for football. I was only about 175 pounds, 180 pounds soaking wet playing D-line. And, kind of got a little bit bigger and did that. But they recruited me and gave me the chance to play both football and basketball. And, looked at a lot of schools in upstate New York where I was from, Ithaca, Cortland, all the way over to Springfield and Mass, a couple of other places, and just ended up finding myself being more drawn to Greenville. And after a college visit out there, that's where I decided to go, the middle of four cornfields in Southern Illinois. Shocking my parents and a lot of other people, but it was I wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
Well, and you mentioned two sports, but if I read your resume right, wasn't there four sports going on there?
Yeah, I somehow found a way to letter in four sports, and two of which I had never played in high school or before. So I had never played tennis. I was in a tennis class, and the tennis coach saw me. They were a little shorthanded that year, and he said, "Hey, how'd you like a spring break trip to Hilton Head, South Carolina?" I said, "What do I got to do?" And he's like, "Just show up every day." I said, "I can do that. I'm skilled enough for that." And one year I had a situation with football with an injury, and it wasn't going to be cleared to play medically. So I found myself as a goalkeeper on the soccer team. And so, it was a great opportunity. The next year I was able to get right back to football. So that was a big thing. So it was a good experience, enjoyed it. And, like I said, I think it's made me in my new role as an athletic director, it's given me kind of more of that wide sport perspective, not just thinking about things from the traditional football coach mentality.
Now, when does it start? The wheels start turning in your head that coaching is what you want to do with your career.
Yeah. So I always thought I was a physical education, English ed major. I was going to be a teacher, coach. I thought I was going to teach kids to play dodgeball and, do that for the rest of my life. And then I did my student teaching, and to say that it was not cut out for me would be an understatement. Trying to teach a couple of junior high kids how to read the Rime of the Ancient Mariner and, things like that. And, going into a couple of schools where teaching phys ed was probably not the chosen subject matter that they really wanted to do. I kind of didn't see myself in that role. And I walked into my defensive coordinator's office. Well, first I called my parents. I said, "We just wasted 4 years of college education. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't want to be a teacher." And, my dad and mom were like, dude, you're certified to teach. You're going to be a teacher. You're going to have to, or you're going to come work. My dad was a prison guard. He said, you come work at the prison with me and get a state pension, you'll be fine. I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that either. And so I went to my football coach, and Coach Gonzaga said, hey, a buddy of mine just got a head coaching job. He said he's looking for some young graduate assistants. I could help you get the job. I had no idea what that meant because we didn't have GAs at my school. And he goes, you're going to go and you're going to coach a position. They're going to pay for you to get a master's degree in something else. I'm like, oh, this sounds great. He goes, it's out on and he tells me, and you're going to love this. He goes, it's out on the East Coast, so it'll be close to your house where you grew up in New York. I'm like, oh, even better. And so then I find out it's Glenville, West Virginia. And so the day after our basketball season ended, I actually withdrew from school because I had enough credits to graduate, dropped my student teaching and went out to Glenville and became the defensive line graduate assistant. And I'd say about 3 months into it, I was like, wait, they're going to pay me to do this for the rest of my life? This is a pretty good gig. I can drink coffee, eat Cheetos, and watch VHS tapes at that time, and watch a bunch of football and be pretty happy. So that's kind of when I decided coaching was going to be the future. Originally, that was just to go get a master's degree. I was getting a master's degree in human resources and things like that. And I thought, okay, I'll just go work for a company and do that. And 26 years later, here I am.
Now, how does the Glenville is where you were coaching, but you get your master's degree through WVU. How does that work?
Yeah, so I don't know who started and how they started, but it was awesome, and I'm glad I got to take advantage of it. All the state schools and what was then the West Virginia Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, the WIVIAC, so Shepherd, West Liberty, Concord, a few other schools. Mm-hmm. Everybody had an agreement where they could get master's degrees could get graduate degrees from WVU because they were all state-sponsored universities. Okay. And so there was an agreement. And so I wasn't getting paid anything. I was getting paid about $400 a month, living in a abandoned warehouse that we had kind of built the walls up inside of it down there in Glenville. And but they paid for the master's degree. And so I was able to get a master's degree in I switched to communications at West Virginia. And that was, it was great. I got a degree. I did it about 18 months, and they were in-person classes on the weekends. So you would go Friday night from like 5 to 10 o'clock at night, Sunday from 8 to 5 in the afternoon, and Saturdays they were 8 to 5. Well, we had games. And so they excused me from the classes. So in the fall, I didn't have to go to some of the classes because of football, and I had to make up the work, afterwards. So they were really flexible with those of us that were in those GA positions.
Well, and it's got to be a good time to come into Morgantown on a Friday evening and go back, coach some football, come back and hang out for Sunday evening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were some places that, I don't know if they're still around because it's been a long time since I've been to Morgantown. There's Bent Willie's and a few other places that were really good, places to go and have a night away. Glenville, West Virginia was a pretty small town, and there wasn't much going on. And I think they maybe had two bars in the town and 2 restaurants. And if the college kids were out, you weren't going to be there as a coach. So you had to go somewhere else.
Now, how does that, for people that are getting ready to get into that, into the coaching realm, they're going to finish up senior year and maybe you're stepping into GA spots. Maybe there are some guys this year that are stepping into GA spots. How do you talk to that guy that wants to make the transition, especially if it's a Lake Forest guy that's going to stay on and be a GA? What's the conversation like? Hey, you're not a player anymore. I understand that these might be your roommates and your fraternity brothers or whatever, but now you're a coach. How does that conversation go?
Yeah, I'm really big on not having my guys stay for the first year. I want them to go somewhere else. And it's actually not because of what you mentioned. It's for they've had 4 years with me, and I'm all they know of college football. So what new idea are they going to bring to me as a GA to help improve our program? They're just going to keep reinforcing the things that they've done for 4 years as an athlete. They can give some feedback of how the players maybe perceive what the coaches were doing. But I like for my guys to go someplace else for at least a year before they come back and coach for me. I also do think that helps with that relationship piece of, you're not coaching the guy that you were, having a lot of fun with in your undergrad. And so if you are going to stay on someplace, which I know a lot of schools do, and I've helped with, when I was at Wingate in particular, we kept guys on board. I think it's really important to set very hard lines that respect the relationship you have now, which is different. You can't be their best friend. You have to be somebody who's going to hold them accountable. You have to be someone who is going to call them up to a standard when the time is necessary, and getting them to see you as a young coach, instead of, like you said, fraternity brother, roommate, whatever it might be. That relationship is just so different, and both sides have to be respectful of it. I really encourage the guys who are becoming those coaches to sit with their best friends that were on the team that are still there and be like, look, the program is more important right now. We need to take this time. You're going to be a senior this year for the next 3 months, the next 4 months. We have to have a really strong respect of coaching. You're not going to like everything that I say, but my job is to do what the head coach has asked me to do, and that's got to be paramount to our success. So if everybody's working towards that same goal, it should be okay. But I do think that it takes time to have some conversations on the front end of what is now about, what is appropriate and what is not.
Right.
It's also one of the things where I am very aggressive about our players referring to coaches by coach name. For me, it's Coach Cat. For somebody else, it might be, Coach Woodson, Coach Williams, whatever. They can't just call them by, none of our players are going to walk to me and say, "Hey, Cat." Like that's not going to be a thing. There's going to be coach. And so even with the youngest coaches on our staff, I think that title delineates some responsibilities and brings a little bit more respect to the relationship.
Right. So now after the 2 years, you're leaving Glenville with a master's from WVU. Why was it time to make the move to Wingate?
I couldn't keep making $400 a month. After 3 years, that was getting a little tough. But it was given a chance at Wingate with Joe Reich, who still I'm really close to. Coach Reich had an opportunity and to go to the South Atlantic Conference, which I think is one of the best Division II conferences in the country. Carson Newman, those guys, Catawba at the time was a top 5 school in the country. To have that opportunity to have a full-time position, with benefits. I felt like a big boy when I got my first benefits package, right? Retirement and all that good stuff. And then I realized they just take it out of your paycheck. They don't actually give it to you. They're just taking it out. That was a really cool thing. And to be honest with you, being an upstate New Yorker, going to school in Greenville outside St. Louis, 30 miles or so, but then being in West Virginia, I wanted a more metropolitan area. I want to start getting back to at least a suburban, be able to access a major city within a couple, 30 minutes or so. And Wingate's 30 miles outside downtown Charlotte. And, I was 25 years old, single at the time, and looking for, the next parts of my life. And I didn't know that I was going to find it in the hills of West Virginia. So getting there to Glenville, or going from Glenville to Wingate, I felt like I was stepping up a level in football a little bit. I felt that even though they were both Division II schools, I thought that it was a great opportunity to move to a major metropolitan area outside Charlotte. And I was 25. I was like, I can go anywhere right now. And so I didn't know what the next job was going to be. I was kind of in the battle. Do I want to stay in scholarship level? Do I want to return to Division III? And that was something that I wrestled with a little bit. I turned down a GA position at a Division I school where I felt like I was going to be the coffee boy after I'd been the D-line coach for 3 years at Glenville. Right. And I didn't really want to make that move, so I went to Wingate, and it was a great experience there too. And
then when does Lake Forest come onto the radar for you?
Yeah, so it was actually after my second year at Wingate, Brent Becker becomes the head coach at Lake Forest at that time, and Brent had been my linebacker coach in college my senior year. And so he calls me, and he's got a position open, but it's not a great fit. It's to be the offensive line coach and to be the tennis coach. And because I had coached tennis in college, or I played tennis in college, like, oh, you're a perfect fit for this. I'm like, yeah, but I don't coach offense. I'm not an offensive line guy. Like, that's not my thing. So I came out, met with him. Wasn't the right time, wasn't the right situation. So I go back to Wingate for another year. The next year, I actually get called for 3 jobs within 6 days. And it was a really cool experience. Everything from a 1AA position coach to Lake Forest at a Division III coordinator job. So now I'm getting called for the defensive coordinator job. And I'm kind of like, all right, this is a chance to be a coordinator. At the time, I didn't think that opportunity was going to present itself at Wingate because the defensive coordinator, Rashawn Jordan, who's now the head coach there, had been with Coach Reich for 15 years or something like that at that point. They stood up in each other's weddings, the whole deal. I'm like, all right, he's going to be a DC here forever. If I want to be a coordinator, I got to go somewhere. And Lake Forest, being 30 miles outside of downtown Chicago, I'm continuing to keep that metropolitan area. my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was a college coach as well, and she coached field hockey. And it was one of those situations of like, okay, if we go someplace and we're going to go together, this is a place that has field hockey and lacrosse in the area, and you can still coach. It's just not at the collegiate level.
Right.
And we kind of made that decision to take the shot of me becoming a coordinator, her coming up here and being a high school coach. And now 20 years later, we're still doing it.
Now, what's the conversation like? We're going to start there. What's the conversation like when you interview for as interviewing for a position coach opportunity and then interviewing for the D coordinator? What's the difference between the interview?
Yeah, so it was significantly different. So I'll lay all the cards on the table. I was interviewing at Charleston Southern University for their D-line position, and we'd actually played them at Wingate that year and beat them. So a D2 school beats a 1AA school, and I think we had 7 sacks in the game with our D-line. And so they had seen it up close and personal, had seen the coaching. I had met their coach when I was coming out of high school. He had recruited me a little bit up in the Northeast. And we just kept in touch as I got into coaching. And so as we were talking, you go there and you can see, I could kind of get a sense that the head coach really wanted me. The defensive coordinator was warming up to the idea of wanting me there. And then I went around with a couple of their position coaches and spent time with them to find, okay, what's it like to be a position coach here? And the guy that actually gave me my tour of town was Jamie Chadwell, who's now the head coach at Liberty. Right. And he and I are on the board of trustees for the AFCA. And I talk about how driving around that town with him was one of the things that actually turned me off to the job. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, you started telling me how expensive it was to live here. And I was like, I heard what they were going to pay me, and I wasn't going to be able to afford to live in any of the apartments you were showing me. And so I think that was a really good experience. But they put you on the board, and they're really, when you go as a position coach, a lot of times it's a lot more about the technique. They want to hear how you're going to teach certain techniques, what you value. Does it fit the schemes that they want to do? Whereas when you go as a coordinator, they want to see how it all fits together. They want to see that what you're doing makes sense and it's building upon something. I think that one of the things that I had that was unique when I did my first coordinator interview is I had lesson plans, just like a teacher. And so, you have your install sheets where, hey, this is what we're going to install this day and this day. Well, I actually had these lesson plan sheets that had every key term, every, single thing that was going to have to go into that conversation to make sure we didn't miss anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that they were surprised by that organization. They had never done it that way. And so I think that there was that. And I'm sitting there in this, okay, we're still talking, 2005 at this point. I still had the overhead projector sheets that we were going to use to install that we could mark up. We had the printouts for the kids. And we're just moving everything, I think, at that point, maybe to Visio or PowerPoint. I don't think we're quite into PowerPoint yet. And so it's just trying to show them how I was going to teach day 1, day 2, day 3, and where that was going to lead to. And I think that that's where the interviews were a little bit different. I also think in the position coach situation, they're looking for balance on that side of the football. Does your personality balance the other coaches on that side of the ball? Okay. And fit in where they also don't. They think you're going to be, a strong leader, but you're not going to try to overthrow the government and take over the coordinator job from within. Right. When you're the defensive coordinator, I think that the head coach, at least in my experience, and even when I interview people, it's like I want somebody who's going to be able to lead that side of the ball. Will understand that it's not just the offense, not just the defense, that they have to be into the full team, chemistry and philosophy, and go from there. And so to me, that's part of when I hire people. It's really about they need to be a little bit of balance to me, but they also have to be like-minded enough to say, we're going to push this the same direction and not make this a divisive team.
Right. Now, and then on that same topic, a couple years later, you're interviewing for the head coaching job. And I imagine from the conversations that I've had, that head coaching interview is more community outreach, education. Like how are we going to get grades to be where they need to be in GPAs, retention, recruiting, budgeting. So how much football talk do you have when you're going from a coordinator position to the head coaching position?
Yeah, and mine was a little bit weird because I was actually the interim head coach. And so they named me the interim head coach for a couple of years and then made me do a national search after I'd already done it. I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. And so they kind of had me come in and The only people that asked me football questions on that whole interview day was the players.
Okay.
Nobody else asked me a single football question, but you're right. I said it was the 3 R's. It was recruiting, retention, and raising, whether it was fundraising or GPA raising or programmatic raising up. Those were the 3 things that they focused on every step of the way. When you talk to the fundraising people, they didn't care about the on-field performance. When you talk to the admissions people, they didn't care about the on-field performance. When you talk to everybody else, they just wanted their numbers going to go up, and build the roster and do things like that. And so I would say if football I always laugh when people make these really big packets for football and then they bring you to a head coaching interview. I'm like, nobody is looking at that. They already assume you're an expert on football. They want to know, do you have the right personality? Are you going to be collaborative? Are you going to have, shared goals with the institution? Or are you going to fight that, hey, you only want to have a roster of 105 and they want you to have a roster of 125? Are you going to be able to get to an agreement where that needs to go? And so I think that, all that time that's spent on some of those binders, I think those binders get like, oh, that's nice. It looks professional. Put it over here. And then they never get looked at. So.
Well, maybe they pull it back out. Hey, look, this is how I went through the interview. Look how organized I was.
Yeah. I felt a lot more organized when I was interviewing than my first year coaching. Being the head coach, I can tell you that.
Now, Coach, being at at Lake Forest now, that wasn't the only head coaching position you had, right? You also were men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse.
Yeah, I started the club programs here in preparation for us to go varsity. I think we thought it was going to be like a 3 to 4 year window. It ended up being 10 years before we added varsity. And so that was a lot of fun. But I will say that, coaching other sports, I've actually coached tennis when there was a maternity situation. I've coached, I helped with women's basketball, at Glenville for a little bit. To me, coaching these other sports has made me a better football coach because you can't coach women's lacrosse players the same way you coach your football team. Right. And the independence of those sports, lacrosse players have to be given a lot more freedom to do what they want to do. Whereas, if your wide receiver takes one extra step on his 3-step route, you're like, it's no good. And so I think that learning some of that and accepting some of the creativeness and freedom that allowed the players to play at a really high level in those sports made me a better football coach. Knowing those different personalities definitely helped. I mean, again, having a East Coast men's lacrosse player from, a private school in Boston versus having a Midwest offensive lineman from Central Illinois, they're not the same. And you have to be able to continue to balance how you reach out to different people. And there were things in both sports that I used as kind of cross training for those different teams and really enjoyed it. And, still to this day, my record as a women's lacrosse coach is way better than it is as a college football coach. So, I think I've won about 68% or 70% of the games as a college football coach. And I think I won 90% of my women's lacrosse games. So talent makes coaches look better.
Right. Now, when do you start to transition into an administrative role as well? And how does that time management thing work out? Because now you're not just focused on the football team, you got to focus on the athletic department as a whole.
Yeah. So I started serving as an assistant athletic director. That eventually became an associate athletic director and continued to move up. But the assistant athletic director roles, I was running our Forrester Game Plan program, which is a career prep program for our student athletes. And it was a big program across our entire department. So all 560 athletes were involved in it, working with our career advancement, our alumni people, things of that nature, having different plans. And it was kind of a recognition that I was running that and the strength and conditioning program for the department because we didn't have a strength coach yet. And so I was running it for both. And so literally I was touching all 560 of our student athletes in some capacity in their careers or in the weight room strength and conditioning programs. And this was a big component of why I started to take that role on, or after I took that role, I will say it's kind of a reward for a job well done. And then as I continued to take on some other things and get involved at the NCAA level, serving on the championships committee and things of that nature, that's when moving into the associate AD role. And, our athletic director had been here for 25 years and she moved into a VP role that was a little bit higher up on campus. And that's when I became the athletic director the first time. And so, I was there for years, skipped out for 3 years. Now I'm back in that role.
And what made you go back into the role after the hiatus?
Yeah, I think that there was a timing piece to it that was really, really good. I also, felt there was a need We had I don't want to call it a leadership vacuum because that's not really fair, but there was a lot of change. Our VP had left, our AD had left, and our president had left. And so literally as the associate AD, I felt like I was almost kind of like the highest person who'd been here that knew what was going on. And I wanted to make sure that some of the integrity and some of the tradition that makes our department really strong continued, while also being able to take my own spin on things to tweak and maybe grow us a little bit differently than what we were before. And so I just thought it was a really good time. I thought the timing for me as a coach, the agreement that I would continue coaching and not have to step away from that side of my life was also a component. Whereas I think the first time there was a much bigger desire for me to stop coaching after, X number of years. And those conversations didn't happen this time. So for me, I think that from a timing perspective, I think it was just better for me as a coach, as an administrator. There's some things on the personal side. I have a special needs daughter and some things that had gone with her diagnosis 3 to 4 years ago that we as a family weren't quite ready for. Putting a little bit more time into that for the last 3 years so that's now a little bit more stable. And I think that all those things combined really made this time, 4 years later, a much better time for me to transition into doing both than maybe what it was in 21.
Right. Now, talk to me about what a Forester is. What are you looking for? Like when you're obviously a kid got to be able to play ball, but what are you looking for other than that? Because we wouldn't be talking if he didn't play ball.
Yeah. So definitely got to have some talent. The other two things that are really big is there's an academic profile for us, and it's not as simple as just GPA and test score. It's not the old days. Are they committed to being really good at academics, or are they just really going to slide through and get their C's or whatever? Those kids aren't going to make it here. We really want people that are driven and motivated. And if you're driven and motivated in football, you should automatically carry that same characteristic trait over to your academics and your career pursuits. The second thing we want is men of unbelievably high character. I really believe that if I've got men of high character, it's a lot easier to coach, and it's not just lip service. I am known. I actually hired an assistant athletic director who's my deputy athletic director, who used to work in a school where I used to go in and I would ask him about kids that he didn't coach. And I'm like, I want to know about this kid. I want to know what you know. I want to dig some dirt. Has this kid got a good reputation on campus? And the number of times I will still do that, which is something I think has been removed from a lot of the coaches. A lot of the coaches are just doing it through Twitter and Huddle and things like that. And then, the kid called me back, so I'm going to recruit him. For me, I want to know that I always tell our players, I'm the bouncer of the locker room. If somebody gets past me, they belong. If they don't get past me, it's my job to make sure they don't get in there and ruin the culture that we have. Right. So we cap our roster. We're different. We don't just bring in as many as we can. We have a roster limit that is imposed institutionally. And so we're not going to go above that number. And we want to make sure it's the right kids in the locker room growing our program. The third and final thing we want is they got to want us. They got to want the Lake Forest experience. It's not about me trying to convince them that this is the right place. It's about me saying, here's what we do. Here's what we believe in. Are you about this life? And is this appealing to you? Because if it's not, there's 249 other Division III schools. There's 115 Division II, 1AA, whatever. Go to one of those schools. You don't have to come here and do things our way, but this is how we're going to do them, and we're not going to change the program for one individual. The individual has to conform to the program.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Coach, talk to us a little bit about, so you said 30 minutes outside of the Chicago area. What's the recruitment immediately? Like where is it? A 30-mile radius? Is it a 15-mile radius? Is it a national radius? Is it Arizona?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of Arizona, right? We are a national recruiting school, and it's our school as a whole does this. So yes, we recruit our backyard. We're still going to have our Chicagoland guys. We don't venture north of the border into Wisconsin a whole lot because of all the state leagues and just the cost differential. But yeah, we got 52 kids from Arizona on our team, and that has been a pipeline that I kind of started cultivating, 15 years ago or so, and it's really turned into one of the most wise decisions I probably ever made. When I tell everybody that we had 62 kids on the team when I got here in 2005, and now we've got 52 kids from Arizona, we've done all right. That's a pretty good investment.
Right.
And so we do recruit nationally. We got a good pocket of kids from Northern California, a couple of guys from Texas that really, are impactful. So we just try to find the right fit. Like I said, it's not about numbers for us. It's about individuals that fit our culture, and that want what we have. It is truly got to be a mutual attraction. And yes, football talent matters, but we know we can find football talent. It doesn't matter if you're up in Idaho or down in Rome, Georgia, or Rome, New York. It doesn't matter. You can find kids in those areas that can play ball.
Right. Now, are you guys using the transfer portal as well? And my question, more or less, especially given what you just outlined for us, are the guys you're looking at in the transfer portal Lake Forest recruits that maybe decided, oh, I want to go and try the bigger school, or I want to go here for a financial reason, or whatever that reason is? Is that who, when you get into the portal, is that who you're looking at, or those guys that you already had a connection with?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily. You're not getting a portal update at our place. We're not going and looking in there every day to say, oh, let's see who got in today that we can recruit. It is 100% people who we've either previously recruited that then reach out to us, or oftentimes it's a guy who has a teammate already in the program. Somebody who they know a guy in our program. They see the experience that he's having. They're jealous of it, and they want that. That's one of those things that. If we bring in 3 kids out of the transfer portal, that's a lot for us. Okay. But this year we had, 2 guys come in January. One was a guy we recruited out of high school that, chose to go to a 1AA school, and they had a coaching change and an offensive change, and it didn't fit him anymore. So he called us, and his dad called us. It was like, hey, we wanted my son there anyway, but it was free there, and it was going to cost us this at your place. Now we're willing to pay that amount because we realize it's worth it. I was like, perfect. I'm all in. And, so a kid or 2 like that, yes. Previous transfers were, they were the son of an alum who, again, the 1AA school came calling. They went to that level and then realized that we were a better fit academically and otherwise. And I'm all for that. But I'm not going to go in there and try to, replace needs or things like that. I think this year in the summer, our 3 transfers that are coming in, one's brother was an All-American for us. He was at West Point and now is transferring to us. We had another guy whose dad was an alum of the college. And then the third was a guy who has 4 guys from his high school on our team already that he graduated with. And he was just like, this school is not getting it done for me. I want to go where they are and enjoy my time in football. And they've told me what it requires, and I'm all about it. I'm like, okay, well, you're coming in with the right attitude. Let's have at it. But We're not going in there and searching for players by any means.
Coach, what's it mean to have the most wins in school history for you?
Well, considering the guy who's number 2 is still on my coaching staff, I try not to talk about it a whole lot. It's a testament to the players, man, and to the school as a whole. Because if you look at my first 3 years, I mean, we were 7-23. They could have said at that moment the number of places where if you're 7-23 in 3 years, you're fired is pretty significant in college football. And they stuck with me. They saw the progress. They believed in what I had been telling them was going to happen. I was like, look, you just got to let me get, I said year 5. Let me get to year 5. You will see the difference in the program, the culture, the things of that nature that we've been working through and that we sacrifice wins for. But it came in year 4, and we win a conference championship in year 4. And so you go from going 7-23 to going 8-2 and winning a conference championship, and you look like the smartest guy in the room, and then you don't win another one for 10 years. So maybe you weren't that smart. But it was at least, they could see the progress of going from where we were to, that year we were 3-7. We were 3-7, but we were also 1-score games with 4 other opponents. And so when you get things like that and you start to see that progress, I think it's a testament to the institution at that time. The president and the athletic director who said, you know what, this is our guy. He's doing the right things. Let's stick with it. Let's let this play out and see where we can take this. And so it really has not much to do with me. I tell everybody that's like, I'm a good coach. I wouldn't put myself up in the Larry Karras levels or anything like that. I've been at one place for 15 years as a head coach, and we've won more than we've lost. And we've hit a pretty good hot streak over the last, 4 to 5 years.
Well, Coach, it's interesting you brought up the first 3 years and the record there. The past 9, you've gone 68-17. So I would say it's a pretty good stretch of 9 years right there. Yeah. I mean, that's 9 consecutive winning seasons is nothing to slouch about. And as a Steeler guy, come on, I've been listening to that's the big argument for Mike Tomlin. He's never had a losing season. We everybody hold on a second. So, talk to me about the 2024 season. Just real quick, recap it. I mean, 10-1, the conference championship, second round of the playoffs. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, it was a really special team and a special group of seniors. We had 38 seniors on that team,
Mm-hmm.
and there were probably, I think, 9 or 10 who were, fifth year guys from the COVID year that they would have been freshmen on, and they were just guys who totally bought into what we did from the jump, and many of them came back with such a renewed sense of pride and attention to detail last year because we had fallen short of the goal in 2023. They had won a conference championship in 21 and 22. In 23, we beat Illinois College in week 1, who ends up winning the conference championship, but we dropped 3 games down the stretch, and we just didn't play good football at times. And so they really felt that they had left some things on the table and wanted to make sure that that wasn't the last taste in their mouth. And they came back and, going 10-0 with some dramatic wins. I mean, if you look at the Illinois College game and the Monmouth game, those were I probably aged 10 years in those 2 games alone last year. But then, you get rewarded because the NCAA changes their playoff model, right? They go to this NPI computer ranking. It's no longer human element. And just by virtue of our non-conference team that we played going 7-3, we bump up to a higher seed than we'd ever had. And that gave us that first round bye with an opportunity to get healthy, play a team that's going to have to play a game the week before. It was one of the protected buys, so there's nothing any human could do to change it, right? Unfortunately, we go up to Bethel, Minnesota, because we weren't allowed to host. The NCAA made a declaration about our press box, so we weren't allowed to host. And we go up there for Thanksgiving, and that was great to have the team meal together, and it's -8 degrees. And I mentioned we have 52 guys from Arizona, right? They loved it. There was no weather issue, but we did lose a couple of players in the middle of the third, early in this third quarter on that depleted roster because you're only allowed to dress 58 for those games. And, kind of got away from us there. We kind of tried to fight back into it at the end. And I was part of the way our guys fought and just wish we would have not made some of the errors, particularly on special teams that we made in that game that I think a lot of us will think about for a long time. So that was a really special group of guys, great leaders. Who have really inspired the group that's coming back. And I think that they didn't just take it with them when they got their ring. They reminded the guys on their way out the door, so to speak, of like, hey, don't do what we did in 2023. You were here for that. You learned it. Learn those lessons so you don't have to experience it again.
Right. Now, Coach, staying in 2024 real quick, you talked about a couple things there, the expansion of the playoffs, which I think all of us knew is way long overdue. The new format with the protected buys, do you like that?
Yeah, I do. I think that do I think the NPI ranking system can maybe take a little tweaks?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I do also think that we make the mistake sometimes of saying that strength of schedule is all that matters, and that's not really able to be done in football because our league had 1 non-conference game. The WIAC, I think, had 3 non-conference games. So right. if you can schedule 3, you can boost your strength of the schedule. Whereas teams that have 9 conference games, if you have 9 conference games, you're going to have a strength of schedule under 500%. It's going to be under 50 because you're the winning team. So you're going to have teams that had losses.
Right.
And that's one of those things where there's an imbalance there that I don't know how to address it. I was on the national committee. I've been on the RAC committee. I don't know how to do that. Perception wise, there's always this, our 4th team would go into the conference, and they went, it's like, yeah, but you didn't win 3 of the games in your league. So like, you got to have a little bit of humility with that as well. Mm-hmm. Not to say that there aren't better leagues than other leagues or better teams than other teams. And maybe there's teams that aren't in the playoffs that could beat teams that are in the playoffs. Correct. But we're still an automatic qualifier system. So if you win your conference championship, you're going to have access to the NCAA tournament. And
right.
Now there's these at-large positions. We added, 6 more at-large positions or 5 more at-large positions, whatever it was, to get to 40. I think that is where, now you have another chance. And so if you don't get into the first chance, you got a second chance. Mm-hmm. I don't know that you get a third chance, and that's one of those things where I think that, you got to win. Right now, if you're 9-1, you're probably getting into the tournament. If you're 10-0, you're definitely getting in, obviously. And then, 8-2 could get in with some luck. And I think that's where if you get to the point where you need luck to get into the tournament, you've had your opportunities to earn those. And again, some losses might be better than some wins, but you still got to get the wins to get there. So I do think there can be a little bit of tweaking there, but I actually think it brings a a tournament together that is, it has the right components.
Right.
It's tweaks now. It's not overhaul.
Well, and it's interesting, did the expansion really just eliminate the looking at a 9-1 team and questioning why they weren't in? I mean, I think the year prior to last year, you had, I think Linfield was left on the outside, and they were a one-loss team. I think St. John's was left on the outside; they were a one-loss team. So is that kind of what the expansion did? Was it eliminated that looking at the one-loss team and questioning why? Now, obviously, 41, 42, 43, not going to agree with me, but
Yep.
we could make it 50 and then 51, 52, 53 wouldn't agree. So,
Yep.
but was that kind of the big fix? Was you're not looking at a team on paper, looking at their record saying, oh, you lost one game. Sorry, you didn't make it this year.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it, but I also think it was it took away the human bias, right? The bias to say that, well, this team would beat this team if they played each other, so we should put that team in. Well, you don't really know that. Like,
right.
We can look at the film and we can make some evaluations. Say yes, that 8-2 team should beat that 9-1 team on paper, on film, on everything, but they didn't play. And there's not a lot of cross divisional or cross region geographically play that you can see in certain regions. Like, I think Cortland State winning a national championship a couple of years ago, nobody had them at the beginning of the year ranked in the top 15 in the country.
Right.
They were a team that hadn't had a lot of crossover games, had only played really on the East Coast. And then all of a sudden, they beat 3 teams in the playoffs on their way to playing North Central in the national championship game. But it was the first East Coast-oriented team to get to the tournament or to get to the championship game in quite some time. Brockport was the last team to get to the Final Four, and nobody had been in the playoff game, I think, since maybe Rowan. So, I mean, we're going back away. I'd have to go back and look. But, I think that bias meant, oh, well, the East Coast teams aren't as good as the Midwest teams or as good as the West Coast teams or whatever it is. This really put numbers to the test instead of the eye test. That could be argued and debated, and the previous stuff that the NCAA used to create the rankings and the rack that they were supposed to follow. There was inconsistencies from rack to rack. The Region 1 might look at things this way and Region 5 might look at it this way. And how do you determine who gets ranked over somebody? Because that's the only team you can talk about as a team that's on the line. And this kind of eliminated it. It tells everybody what your future planning should be. If you're trying to be a playoff team and you want to protect yourself as a 1-loss team or a 2-loss team, here's the type of schedule you have to play to get there, to get those points, or these are the types of games you have to win to get to that level. And so, again, I think the human element can sometimes argue for the things that are most beneficial for them and their people that they represent.
Right.
The computer doesn't care. That bias goes away, and that, it's no longer about who's the best arguer at the table. It's about, okay, the computer says that this is the number we're governed by. And so I do think it prevents that piece. But again, there's no perfect system. The Division I level has a system that's very similar, and you still have, the 9th team that doesn't make the playoff. They're all up in arms, and we're the national champs because we're 13-0 at South Florida, Central Florida, whatever that was. And you got to keep working through that. But I do think that this system is better, having been on both sides. I was the national chair, I was a rack leader. I think this system is more clear. Mm-hmm. There's less ambiguity and there's less question. We knew who was going to be in the tournament the night before it was announced. You could look at the numbers, you could plug the numbers in, you'd see who it was. And so there were no real surprises as that went. I do think that there was some individuals throughout the country that had to keep reading and listening and going through the whole process. And I think that, now that you know that, schedule appropriately. Schedule what is of benefit to you as an individual school or to you as an individual league. But other leagues don't have to adhere to that. They can do what's best for them.
Right. Now, the other big change that came last year was the potential of having 18 iPads on the sidelines. I have yet to find a Division III program that utilized all 18. So I'll start by saying, did you guys implement the iPads? And I was it 8? I feel like that's a more reasonable number than 18.
Yeah, we did bring the iPads. We did do that. I think we had 2 in the press box and probably 6 on the field. And I think that I looked at one clip in 10 games.
Okay.
It was the head coach. I don't have my time to turn my back to it. So it's more me asking, the offense coaches up in the box, hey, look at that last inside zone play and tell me who made that tackle and how they got there. They can give me that information verbally. I know our quarterback coach definitely used it a lot with his guys. And I know the O-line coach used it with his guys. Defensively, I don't think they used it a ton, but I think they did maybe use it a little bit on the D-line group in particular. But it is, again, you have the iPads. You still only got 2 views. You got your tight and your wide, which
Right.
Are good. You'd like to have about 10 more views, I think. And so I do think that it was a good ad. Every high school in the country uses them with they got 55-inch or 75-inch TVs on the sideline now.
Right.
I'm sure we'll get to that at some point because TVs are cheaper than iPads. And, so that was my big argument. Why are we doing this? TVs are cheaper than iPads. Let's just have TVs on the sideline like everybody else. So I think that I think it was a good ad. I don't know that maybe we didn't use it as well as some other schools maybe did, but I thought we used it well for who we are.
Does it change the chess game as a coach looking, especially a defensive coach looking across the sideline? You're watching an offensive guy. Does that take a little bit of the chess game away, or does it add to the chess game?
I think it adds probably, but I think that if you were a good if you're charting and your play drawing and things like that you were doing in the game previously just on paper was pretty good, you start to figure out how people are aligning to you, and you hope you captured it pretty well if guys were disciplined. But I do think this allowed the review portion to go back and look at things that I thought was pretty good.
And then the other question I have with the iPads, I know there's some technology things in different conferences that are getting launched in. My question more leans, are we heading towards maybe a red box on the sideline where we just have an iPad for officials and not so much, let's not challenge. I'm not looking to challenge a touchdown because, again, you said most schools you're getting 2 angles. You're not going to be right down the sidelines. I don't need to know if it was a catch or a first down. My reasoning is targeting. Targeting call can eliminate a kid you're guaranteed 40. One call can eliminate one of those, whether it be a second half and a first half or an entire game, etc. Do we get to the point where instead of having to wait for the end of the game or wait till halftime or wait to submit that film to commissioner, do we get to the point where the coach can call a timeout and say, hey, I don't think that was targeting. We have it queued up for you right here. Can we take a look at it? I'd like to not lose this guy for an entire half of football. Do you think we're heading towards something like that?
I do. I think that should be paramount to everyone in the Division III realm. Last year, I think the number that was shared with us is there were 36 targets sent in for appeal to the NCAA, and 33 of the 36 were overturned and said that it would not have been targeting. So that's 33 halves of football or some portion of football that young men lost out on because of those calls. Now, I still think that we're going to see, if we go to that, we'll also see the challenge. I think you're going to get the red beanie. You use your timeout to get it. If you're found to be correct, you get the timeout back. I think that we're going to probably head towards something of that nature. But also that if the referees want to opt into a review, I think that may be a thing. You're not going to be able to call the Big Ten office and get them to look at it. But again, like you said, if you got one on the sideline in the red box and they want to take a look at it because they aren't sure or they disagree, again, rather than them arguing it out and trying to see who the best debater is, right? Let's get the video and look at it. And okay, if we have a view of it, right? We at most games you're gonna have 3 views. You have your tight, your wide, and then you have your broadcast. And if you've got those 3 views, can it provide enough clarity for you as a official to do that? Now, there's also a part where officials are going to miss calls no matter what that aren't reviewable, and they might make calls that you didn't see it the same way, but they did. That's okay, and we got to be able to continue to agree to that. It's we just got to get as best as we can to make the game as positive and accurate as possible. I think it matters.
And then I've heard rumblings. There's another thing coming down, not this year, but I believe it seems pretty clear that it's coming next year. Are we heading towards helmet communications? And does that, from a fundraising and a financial standpoint, does that put some schools at a disadvantage?
Yeah, so 2025 season, it's in Division One. 26 and 27, Division II and Division III will have the in-helmet communication. I do think that there's definitely obviously going to be a financial component to it. My understanding is it will not be exorbitant. It will not be a level that is not feasible for most schools, especially with a 2-year notice. They were given 2-year notice to say, hey, in 2026, 27, this is going to be legal. You have to opt in. There's going to be different levels of what you can get. No different than headsets that you have with your coaches. Like, the ProCom, the CoachCom, the whatever it is. There's all these different brands that you can get, and some are 15 to 20,000, and some are 5 to 6,000, and you get to make that decision to have access to it. No different than the sideline review. You had the opportunity to do it, whether you decide to get 6 iPads, 10 iPads, 2 iPads, whatever. You had the ability to do that as well. And you could use Huddle that most schools already have with their Huddle AD package, or you could go get Sky Coach or GameStrat or whatever it might be, and go to these different companies. And so you got to make that decision of what investment you wanted to make. And to me, I think that is again, they gave enough notice on this one. Had they made it a decision in April to make it for 25, I think there would have been a lot of flailing of arms because budgets were already set by then. So at least now to put it into your budget for next year through fundraising or otherwise.
Right. And then my last question on that is, with all the technology coming down, what's next? Because we now know you're talking about instant replay. We're talking about in-helmet communication. What's the next domino to fall?
Sure. Are we going to have go routes on our hands out there so we can go faster tempo and just flip to the next play? I don't know. I do tell everybody that there will come a point where the technology will take so far away from the game that the game's already starting to change in certain ways, the way that people are doing things, but that technological dependency will either eliminate some of the coaching skills that have been necessary through the years, or will more greatly impact the need for those skills. Right. Because you're going to have people that are really good on an iPad and really good on a telestrator and really good at this, but they can't actually coach the technique, or they're spending all their time on technology, not their time on, teaching development and coaching skills and being able to communicate verbally to people. And, at some point we're going to have this backlash where the staffing, we can't have I'm going to use the Geek Squad reference. We're not going to have our Geek Squad over here with all the tech and then have our football people over here and then have our recruiting people here. Like, yes, the Division I schools can do that, but the Division III schools will never have, and Division II schools will never have the budgets for that type of manpower to do those things. So I do think there will come a point where it's like, okay, is this even valuable? What is the value of having this? I mean, I won't go into exactly what it was, but we've had some technology that we've been using for the last 3 years. And I literally walked into the room and I said, who's used the information from this technology in the last 6 months? And I look around the coaching table, and one person had used the information, and that was our strength coach. And I'm like, do you need this? He's like, no, I can get this information another way. All right, I just saved $7,000. Right? And to me, like $7,000, that's a lot in our level of football. Right. So if you're doing things and you're not getting a benefit for it, why are we actually doing it? I think that's one of the things that's kind of we all have to be careful of, is like, okay, I can add X, I can add Y, I can add Z, but what was the benefit? Did it raise our program 1% or not 1%? And if it raised it 1%, maybe it's valuable. But if it didn't, we're just wasting money.
Right.
We can be like everybody else because everybody else has this one thing that we want to keep. So
keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is a really cool picture of our guy using this piece of technology. I got 3 social media posts out of it. That was about
it. Coach, talk to us about 2025. What are we looking at? Camp's close.
Man, we're 3 days away. Yeah, we're 3 days away from camp, man. We got a really robust roster coming in, and we'll, again, having 38 seniors last year. This will be a newer group of guys. I won't say it's new because we still got some old dudes that seem like they've been here for 5 years. They've only been here 4, but it's they played a lot of football for us. So I think that we're going to have really strong leadership and really strong talent. A bunch of all conference guys coming back on the defensive side of the ball to help mature the rest of our program. The offensive side of the ball is where we graduated a lot of guys that played for us. We did graduate 9 starters on offense, and graduated, I think, 6 of the top 11 backups. So we did, got hit there, but we've also got some guys that are, we got 3 or 4 seniors on the offensive line in particular that have been behind some guys and have been waiting, but have played, when there were injuries and things like that. Like we've got a young man, Zach Bauer, at tackle. Zach starts in his career are against Monmouth College when we needed to win to go to the championship, against the University of Chicago the last game of the year, and then against North Central in the playoffs, against St. John's in the playoffs, and then, the first 3 games of the year last year where we had to beat Illinois College, the defending champs, in week 2. So he's played some really meaningful football for us, but he's never been the starter. And
Right.
then you got a couple of other guys that at the tight end position that have played a lot of football, but they weren't the starter. At the running back position that have played, probably have 150 carries amongst them, but none of them have over 50. And so it's like there's some guys that have some experience where this is going to be a chance to really take that next step in their career and their performance. The nice part is our offensive coaching staff has stayed relatively consistent. I'm still calling the plays. Our quarterback coach, wide receiver coach, tight ends coach, running back, they're all still here, so that helps. Defensively, we have some turnover in the coaching staff there this year, and so getting an opportunity for a new defensive coordinator to put his stamp on that side of the ball, new defensive backs coach. I also think that we just got a group of guys that are hungry for more success. They've grown accustomed to a certain standard, and they know that that's what we have to do, and they know that it's as much their responsibility to bring these new players in the program up to the cultural standards. We'll get the X's and O's part figured out. They got to get the culture standard from within, not just the coaches standing in front of the room talking about it. And so I'm excited to watch that unfold. And we've got a great schedule, really heavy on the front end of the schedule this year compared to most years. And I'm excited to have our guys come into camp with a sense of urgency to get ready for all those things.
And get ready for, specifically, I'm guessing, Claremont Mud Scripts on September 6th in Arizona. And I got to ask you, how did that come together?
Yeah, so we actually tried playing a game there. It was going to be in 2021. We all know why games got canceled then. But the team we were playing actually dropped football. We were going to try to play Whittier College there. And they dropped their football program. And so then we kind of rebooted and talked to Claremont about, hey, you guys usually have to fly for non-conference games. You could actually take a bus to this one and save your school a lot of money. It's a 1-year deal. I wanted to have a game in Arizona for all of our guys. Like I said, it's 52 guys. There's never been a Division III versus Division III football opponent in the state of Arizona. So this will be the first D3 game out there. We had one of my former players' dad is now the assistant superintendent of schools. He was the principal at Hamilton High School where we're having. He's like, I'll help with the paperwork. I'll help with the red tape to get through some of that stuff. And we're going to play that game down there. And I could not be more excited for not just our current players from Arizona, but the families, you think about the extended families who don't get to watch their sons play in person because they're in Chicago and just the cost. Now the neighbor gets to come watch that kid play and support him. He's known him his whole life. The high school coaches get to come watch them play, and it's going to be a great experience. We had a great partnership with the Chandler Unified School District and the Hamilton High School staff, and we're thrilled to have that game. I don't think I'm going to have to give a pep talk before that one. I think that there's going to be enough juice in there that our guys will be ready to go.
Would like it. Coach, what's something that you would like to see changed nationally?
Gosh, can we ban Twitter? That'd be a start. No, I think that one thing nationally in our football sphere, I would love to de-emphasize the business model that has overtaken Division I and has had ramifications down to the Division II and Division III levels that people don't take under consideration. The expectations that NIL is at all levels of college football that, it's the Division I model has become so transactional. It is what can you do? What can I do? This is what you're going to get for this. Whereas I truly believe the majority of Division III coaches are still about the transformational experience. They're not trying to just tit for tat, this for that. They're really trying to say, okay, how can I grow this young man from the 18-year-old that walks into my office as a freshman to when they leave at 22? How can I be part of their adulthood and their journey from where their parents have brought them to that next level? I really do believe, I look at the different hats and the different banners you have behind you and, thinking about, Chip Taylor up at Hamlin and Brad Spencer at North Central and BJ Hammer at Bowdoin and Chris Douglas at Lyon and all the different places. I sit down BB up at Aurora and just some of the different people that you have there. I know that's what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
But the reputation of what college football is on the national landscape is so narrated by the Division I world that I would love to change that perspective so that people can see that the largest division of college football is Division III with 250 plus schools. What's going on those campuses with those student athletes is what you all hope is going on with those student athletes. It's not what you're reading in the newspapers about what's going on at Georgia or Baylor or wherever else it might be when the negative press lines come in. Don't assume that the players at Del Val or at Elmhurst or Lebanon Valley or whatever it is, that they're having that same experience or they're those same people. I think that changing that narrative for as many people as possible, there's your big change. If I could change that, let's get out of this business model conversation, get back to the business of being educators and coaches and bringing people to that next level.
Right. And then what's the significance of Division III football, which I think you pretty much just outlined.
Well, I tell everybody that there's still this unbelievable opportunity for people that were like me, first generation college kids that never thought about going to this small private school in the middle of nowhere, that had a tremendous experience and received great mentorship from faculty members. Up until his death, the dean of the education school where I went to school, we communicated 5, 6, 7 times a year. Saw each other in person at least once. The coaches that I had at that level, again, because it was transformational, not transactional, those relationships continue to be some of the most pure and successful that I've had. And I just think that mentorship that's available at a small college is so different than at a big university. And when you look across the Division III landscape, we do it better than any. And I think that the opportunity to walk on a campus and not have your entire life be focused on a sport, but to be able to communicate and be a part of the entire campus community instead of being kind of isolated away. I think the Division III small college landscape is still where it's at. It's why I've chosen to stay at this level. It's why I've chosen to, when I was telling you about that decision of, okay, am I going to be scholarship? Am I going to be Division II, mid scholarship, or am I going to go to Division III? When I came back to Division III at Lake Forest, it was a total affirmation for me that this is the level of football where the difference can be made the most by a coach, that I can have an impact on people's lives. And I can tell story after story of the kids that come through our program that might be first generation, might have gone through a divorce their freshman year, might have gone through all these different things. And we as coaches were the ones that were able to be there and help that program as the head coach. It didn't get pawned off to the support staff individual for sports performance and mental counseling. It was us as coaches, helping those young men through that, or people on our campus doing that. And I just think that the value there is, forget the price tags of the institution. After financial aid, we know nobody pays it. So let's just talk about the experience that they're going to have and how meaningful that can be forever.
Mm-hmm. All right, Coach, it's time for the Fast Five. These have nothing to do with football. They're just about you.
Oh, boy.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Caroga Lake, New York. It's we have a camp up there that our family's had for a long time. It's up in the middle of nowhere. And to be honest with you, when I can sit there on the lake over the 4th of July and other places, it's pretty good. Now, I got to be honest with you, that's going to be a 6-month live because I'm not living up there in the winter when they get 72 inches of snow. But in the summer months, for sure, let me live up there.
So that's a from March, well, let's say up there, probably April to
October. We'll go April to October.
We'll leave you alone from November until March. We'll see you later. What's the most important lesson that you've learned over your career?
Oh, gosh. To be adaptable. There are so many things that I had really hard line opinions on early in my coaching career. This is not acceptable. I'll never let that happen. 10 years later, you know what? I'm okay with that now. I think that the best thing that we can demonstrate is a willingness to listen to people, find out the why, and see that, okay, that why makes sense for them. And that why is no less important than the why I had something on the other side. And so that empathetic listening that you can have, the willingness to be able to change and know that all your hard lines, there are some that maybe you won't ever go back on. We're still going to run the football. We're still going to tackle people, right? But there are other things in this life that are more personal choices. And though you're the head coach, though you're, whatever, responsible for this area, the people that are there are just as important as your opinion. And you got to know, is this one of those real hills that you're willing to die on? Mm-hmm. And sometimes asking more questions gives you more clarity on why you think the way you do, or it clouds it up and says, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be as staunch in this position as I am.
If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing?
If I was lucky and I stayed in it, I would be a chef. I would be a cook, on a line somewhere. It's one of my passions. It's my favorite thing to do when I'm not coaching. It's one of the things I spend a lot of time with. And so, let me get in the kitchen. I don't have to do anything fancy. I can be a little breakfast spot in a little small town. I'd be just as happy. I think in Glenville, the place is called the Commonplace. Let me fry up some eggs and toast and bacon every day and to have people be happy. But every once in a while, I'll make that fancy platter that makes people a little bit more excited.
Right. What's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
Thank you. To be honest with you, when a player finds you and they find you for a moment and they say thank you, and they don't even have to give all the details as to why. Those two words from an 18 to 22-year-old or somebody who's 35 and came back and has that moment of thank you, it tells you from a complimentary perspective that you made a difference. And whether they realized it at the time or later or whenever they realized it, they realized what you had done for them was something maybe nobody else could have done at that time. And so that those two words of thank you from a player, to me, is pretty special.
The other side of compliments. What's the best insult you've ever gotten?
Well, it's from a fan at Monmouth, but I'm not sure I can repeat any of the words they used at me. No, I think that there have been places, there have been places where the insult is, intentional and in the spirit of competition. But I felt the most insulted when a parent once told me I didn't care about their kid. And I knew how much time I had spent with their son, the things that we had worked on that their parent never knew about. Mm-hmm. And so that lack of knowledge of the relationship, they did end up apologizing for it because they talked to their son at some point. But I will say that piece, when a parent whose son I had really, I couldn't tell you the number of hours that myself and our coaching staff had done to try to help this young man and eventually did. Mm-hmm. To be told you don't care about my son, that was a tough one. That was a tough one.
And then, Coach, the last question I ask everybody, was there a question you were expecting? And if so, how would you have answered it?
Man, I thought, the way some of my interviews have gone of late, people keep asking me about rap music and 90s rap music. So I guess I've got a reputation out there. So I was maybe expecting one of those. But, since I didn't get any one of those, I don't know that I have a real answer. But, the last two questions, I've either gotten the Mount Rushmore question or I've gotten the, who in modern rap music reminds you of the old rappers that you used to listen to. And so with that one, I'll throw out Big X the Plug. He's the one that's kind of been getting played in my thing. And I think that he would fit with some of those guys from the early 90s that I kind of grew up on. So
I like that. I think that's a good place to end too. A little Big X the plug. I like it.
There you go.
Coach, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me 3 days before camp, especially. I know this is a busy time of year. So thank you and good luck this year. And for those of you sticking around, you know what comes next. It's overtime. So we'll be right back, Chuckleheads.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Dingo Talk. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. For more info and to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter @DingoTalk.